This podcast is hosted by Sheza Barbour, co-founder of Good Tree Institute, and joined by licensed therapist Archie Aquino and our resident scholar and founder, Dr. Nadia Qatranji.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Good Tree Institute's Timeless Conversations. My name is Sheza Barbour, your host, along with Archie Aquino and Dr. Nadia Qatranji. Let me just state that we are conducting this podcast in a non-traditional Good Tree style, where usually we will cover every word and every ayah in our Quran and Me classes and in our weekend retreats. But in this podcast, we are really just going to go straight to the stories and highlight the stories from the surahs and have those conversations about what is taking place in the surahs and how does that apply to you. So today, we're actually going to jump right into the story of Surah Yusuf. It's a timeless story about family dynamics and the struggles that Yusuf faced, and I'm sure that we face as well throughout our lifetime. Join us with an open heart and mind and see how you can connect with each of the characters in this story. Nadia, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum everyone. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. The nice thing, the beautiful thing about the story of Yusuf alayhi salam is that it's distinct from all the rest of the stories, as you might know, is that it's all together in one surah. And what's so unique about it is that you actually see the dynamic and the characteristics of a story, or even if you will to call it a movie. It's the same kind of way how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts it. And we're just going to walk through that and see. And what's so unique as well is that there are so many characters in the story, and you can see yourself in each character. Usually we like to basically just try to see ourselves as Yusuf alayhi salam, but a lot of the times, and we don't like to kind of like see the other characters as something that we can go off of, but a lot of the times it actually is highlighting certain areas that we deal with as human beings, and there's a lot for us to benefit from, and to see the process of what can you do to get past certain areas that you're stuck in. That's what's so amazing about it. So just before we delve into the story, let's get into the surah. Actually, the beginning of the surah is very interesting, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is starting by talking about the Quran being in Arabic, right? He says, Inna anzalna Qur'anan Arabiyyan. We definitely brought it down as a Quran, as an Arabic Quran. It's actually, the word here is an adjective in Arabic. They call it, it comes right after it. It's describing the Quran being in Arabic. And as we all know, any Quran that's not in Arabic is not a Quran. It's just a translation. And that's why we really like to focus on that aspect. And even when we do the work at Good Tree, we always try to make sure, even if you don't even read or know any word of Arabic, we still keep the ayahs, and we still keep the Arabic, and we still focus on the roots, because that would give you a direct, as much as possible, of a direct contact with the word of the Quran. We try to simplify the meaning as much as possible, because our intention is that you have as least of a barrier as possible with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before we go there, I would just love to hear from you, from Archie and Sheza. Archie being a person who, this is basically, you don't even know the Arabic, you don't even know the letters, you don't read, but yet at the same time when you attend, as you're hearing these words and as you're listening to the Arabic, and then kind of like get word for word and get the roots and all that, what does it add for you as you're interacting with the Quran itself? Would love to hear from you how your experience is with that.
Yeah, to be honest,
aspect of the Arabic.
When I first started attending and everything's in Arabic, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. I don't know what's going on. But as you hear the breakdown and you hear the emphasis on certain meanings of the roots, and then the grammar becomes important, because there are certain things in Arabic that just aren't able to be conveyed in English, like the different tenses of verbs being continuous and always happening, and that kind of infinite sort of perspective on an action really gives it some depth. And then to hear it, the Arabic being recited, gives it a lyrical sort of emphasis and understanding of where the emotions are in the words. And so even though I don't understand it and I don't read it, when I hear it, and you can, this is like for me growing up in a family where, English was a second language for my parents. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I could hear in their tone and in their inflection of what they were saying what the emotions were. And I think that's what's the important part about hearing the Quran in Arabic, is to get that second layer of understanding, not just the literal translation of the words, but also where the emphasis are in the context and the emotional content of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And I just to kind of like pick up on what you said regarding the translation, a lot of the times for the purpose of translation and to make it flow in the language you're translating it to, you would lose, as you said, the aspect of tenses. You would lose the accuracy doesn't get the same. The choice of words is not the same. A lot of the time, just so that you can let it flow, you lose a lot of that depth to it and a lot of that like real touch of what it is. That's why translation is never enough, and it would not give you a window of the culture.
And it makes me trust the Quran more, because as someone who was raised Catholic, and I learned about how Christianity, there was the original language of Aramaic, and then it got translated into Greek, then it got translated into Latin, then got translated into English, and all those translations, there's a lot of room for distortion. So when I heard the Quran wasn't ever translated and we're still studying it in its original form, that to me, as a scientifically minded person, it made perfect logical sense that we're getting more of something that's true to the original meaning.
Yeah, thank you. And on the other end of the spectrum, Shaza, you're somebody who this language is not new to you, right? And
Right.
I know English is still your first language, but you grew up in a household where Arabic is spoken and you learned the Quran, you worked through it. How does this also, what difference does it make for you when we go in the detail of word for word, root words, like we don't bypass that and just get into the meaning right away?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really does open up like a whole other world. I know Arabic, I speak Arabic, I read it, but ever since really studying the Quran, like kind of like good tree style, it just really it opens up a whole other world of understanding, but also for me it was connection, because it makes to me it was just so much more powerful when you understand the Arabic and when you can really delve into it, because like as we talk about in some of our Quran and Me classes or Seeds of Wisdom, we ask these questions of like, there could be 5 different Arabic words for something, and Allah chose this specific word. And when we delve into, well, why this word, it's mind-blowing, because it's very specific, and it just opens up a new level of understanding and even connection with Allah, when you're like, oh my God, he chose this word because he wanted to convey something really specific and nuanced that you might not get when you just say a generic word like love. Well, love can have many meanings, and in Arabic that there's many different ways to express that. And so for me, like, even though I thought I understood Arabic before, this just added a whole other layer of depth that just brought me closer to Allah, actually, and just gave me that more of like curiosity as well, and like a spiritual jump to be like, I need to learn more and I want to learn more.
Yeah. And alhamdulillah, I mean, something that's I'm really grateful for is that now it's that trend of I actually have to learn Arabic is coming back. We had for a long time, we had this era where it's just like, fine, I can just read it and listen to translation or people explaining it, and that's enough. And alhamdulillah, people are picking it up, because as people started in the past, when people started becoming Muslims who are not Arabs, it was not even an option for them. They didn't even go to the Arabs and say, okay, well, just like translate it for us. Or they didn't go to bilinguals and say, okay, just give it to me. What does this mean? They went and they actually created the grammar. The Arabic grammar was not even a thing. It was the non-Arabic speaking Muslims who invented and put the language, the Arabic language, into its rules. into the grammar and the sarf morphology and all of these things that we know, because they felt that I want no barrier between me and the words of my creator. I want to hear that language firsthand. So that's why it's so beautiful. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reiterates it over and over. And you're going to see, inshallah, as we go. I mean, we hear it over and over for people, just like you said, how the difference that it makes when you understand the real meaning of it. And here's an example with the next surah, the next ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْقَصَصِ. We نقص, the word نقص comes from the root word قصص, which is to follow a trace. So qas, that's why miqas comes from that, right? To kind of like to cut, because you're following a certain trace. So telling a story or narrating is usually translated as naqasasa or qissa, because you're doing that. And Allah is saying, we narrate to you the best of stories, ahsan al-qasas, meaning it's the one that's actually the most accurate, the one that's going to be giving you the real deal, the real actually what happened. As he said, نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن, as how we reveal to you this book. So that's what we want to look into, inshallah, and see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be telling us about the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. But before we do that, let's just kind of like also highlight the aspect of story. One of the things that I heard from some people when we mentioned the stories of the Quran, they say, well, I can't relate. Right? I mean, just like I need something that's very contemporary right now. I can't relate to that. This is kind of like becoming more the narrative right now. I only understand people who are going through only my own life, which I get it. Yes, for sure, you have to do that. However, there is a piece of us that is missing, and I would love to hear from both of you, Archie and Shaza, what you guys are seeing in terms of how are we missing when we limit ourselves to only listening to ones who are or relating to ones who are actually going exactly through what we're going through. That's the only one that I can benefit from. And I cut myself from anything that was, whether in these sacred and amazing books, or from even as far as like my grandparents. Oh, I can't relate. My parents, I can't relate. What are we doing? There's something that we're missing here. And I would love to hear from you, your experience in that aspect.
Yeah, so I have two different unique perspectives on that. One, in that I never got to know my grandparents because I was born pretty late, and by the time my parents immigrated, my grandparents were still in the Philippines, and I never got to know them before they passed away. So not knowing your grandparents, I can understand from a personal perspective that something was lost in not gaining any understanding of who they were as people, not getting an understanding of my connection to the past, to my family's history. And then from working with Native Americans, we learned that the oral tradition is the bridge that was the connection between the generations. Passing things down orally rather than through written form gave that opportunity from the older generation to teach the newer generation not only the value of the story, but how it was related to their lives and how it played out in their families. And so to have that ability to translate a classic story, a story that is timeless, and give it the spin of how it was relative and practical to that older generation, and then for them to pass it on to the new generation and have a discussion about how it relates to them as well, it creates that opportunity for the intergenerational link to be strong and the bond to happen, so that you don't lose the value of the history of time and the culture and the individual family and the individual person. There's so much that gets relayed through oral tradition that's so important.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I think it's important to, not get sucked into our own struggles and think that this is, nobody else has ever experienced this before. And my struggle is just so big, and nobody else can understand it. And one of the things that, I was reminded of in kind of a funny story is going through old family photos and seeing my mom. So my parents are Syrian, so they were raised in Syria and then they came to the US. But seeing my mom in these old photos, she's wearing hijab, but she's wearing this like short skirt. And I was like, what are you doing? like, why are you wearing hijab with a short skirt? Like, how does this even work? But she had to like explain to me that like, well, in that time period, there was a time period in Syria where hijab was banned. And it was really difficult for her and for others that were trying to really hold on to their faith, right? They wanted to wear hijab. They wanted to hold on to as much as possible. So what looked to me like, a compromise or not understanding whatever the deen was really her struggle. And that just her sharing that story of like, well, this is what we had to do to make it work, during that time period, flip things for me, because I'm like, this is the struggle that many of us, all of us, are facing these days, whether you're in the US or different Western countries, is, how do you live through these struggles, and how do you do what you have to do to keep, your faith alive and you being authentic to what you want and to your deen. And so not only does that not is it only like a story about how does my mom's struggle apply to my struggle, but then it also made me think about my daughters, right? And as they, like, I have a teenager and a younger daughter, and what are their struggles, and how is it going to apply to them in this country, in the US? What does hijab look like to them? What does holding on to the deen look like to them, and how do we make it work? So it just opens up this whole intergenerational conversation and relatedness of the
Yeah.
struggle, and it just how it looks in different forms, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think where that came from, at a certain point of time, especially when we had this, people are growing up here in a different, and they had a different perspective and different struggles and different kinds of things. There was this kind of like cut. There was this that an inability to relate to their parents or to another culture, especially that Islam was always narrated in a certain way. So they had to actually figure out how we can understand each other. But what happened, unfortunately, is that basically, you use the term that they threw the baby with the bathwater. Everything was like, oh, I can't relate to anything, and I just like threw out everything, which is not the way that we need to do. Like, yeah, you need to have a relatedness. You need to understand how you deal with your struggle. But remember, we're human beings. We're still the same. You're still going to get a lot of benefit from your history, from your people, from your parents, from your grandparents. And if you don't do that, you are depriving yourself from a wealth of historical human experiences that you could have access to and you could benefit from. So you want to be open and understand, what can you draw from that? Okay, I mean, yeah, there are things that are different. Okay, let me just not worry about that, but let me see, how can I see those similarities? That's what we're going to be doing, inshallah, in the surah. And then take that from it, because we share our humanity with them. And this way we can benefit a lot from that. So having said that, let's look. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts, and speaking that it's a story, it's literally just like how, you have sometimes in the movies, you start with that teaser, like for a climax in the story where it's just like starting with it. That's exactly how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the surah, by putting something that's very attractive, right? He says, وَإِذْ قَالَ يُوسُفُ لِأَبِيهِ, when Yusuf said to his father. Yusuf was around, you would say, it would call him a feta, like maybe around 10 years old, something like that, Allahu A'lam. He came to his father and he said, إِنِّي رَأَيْتُ أَحَدَ عَشَرَ كَوْكَبًا. So he's telling him a dream. He said, I saw 11 stars, وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ, and I saw the sun and the moon. رَأَيْتُهُمْ لِي سَاجِدِينَ, I saw them to me prostrating. So he just came and he said, this is the dream that I saw. That's it. And you see a lot, by the way, you're going to notice how Yusuf alayhi salam, all what we're hearing from him are just the facts of what's going on. He just tells you this. And then let's listen to Yaqub alayhi salam's answer. He replied, he had two responses. I'm just going to mention both of them, and then we can look at the details of it. The first response, right off the bat, he said, قال يا بني, oh my son, لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك. Do not tell this story or this dream to your brothers. فَيَكِيدُوا لَكَ كَيْدًا, so that they would plot a plot for you or against you, basically. إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ لِلْإِنسَانِ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. The shaitan or the Satan is definitely a clear enemy to the human being. So that's how he starts. The first thing he warns him, that's his first response. And we're going to get to that in a minute. And then he says, وَكَذَلِكَ يَجْتَبِيكَ رَبُّكَ. It's like that your caretaker, your master chooses you. وَيُعَلِّمُكَ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. And he would teach you from the interpretation of the narratives. He would teach you how to do that. So he kind of like got that about him. وَيُتِمَّ نِعْمَتَهُ عَلَيْكَ وَعَلَى آلِ يَعْقُوبَ. This is the piece that I want to highlight. Just keep it in your mind because we're going to get back to it. And he completes his blessing on you and on the family of Yaqub, of Jacob, peace be upon him. كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق. Just exactly as he completed it onto your two fathers from before, Abraham and Isaac. إن ربك عليم حكيم. Definitely your caretaker is all-knowing and all-wise. So let's get into the first response. The first response is that don't tell this dream, don't tell this dream to your brothers. So as you might know, Yusuf alayhi salam had 10 older brothers from a different mom. And then he had one younger sibling from the same mom. And his father is saying, your brothers are going to plot something against you, so don't tell them about your dream. This highlights something here, right? It highlights something that we want to look into. So what do you see? Of course, there are things that we have to remember. We don't know about a lot of the facts here in the story. We don't know about what was going on. What did they do? All what we know is this aspect. But we want to basically draw from this interaction something that we can benefit from as human beings. We can't tell much about Yaqub alayhi salam, why he did that, what happened before. That we leave it for there. But we want to get for ourselves. What do we get for ourselves from that? So when you hear Yaqub alayhi salam saying, "Don't do that," what conclusion can you draw? We can have two conclusions out of it. What are you guys hearing when we're hearing this? I'd like to open it as a conversation. Let's just talk about it.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, what I'm hearing is just is fear. Is that something's going to happen, and just concern and protection from the point of view of the parent, right? But I can also feel a sense of like, well, if you're Yusuf and you're 10 years old and your dad tells you, don't tell this to anybody, a little bit of shock, like, okay, what's going on? What do I need to be aware of that I need to keep this private? Because you're still a child. And so you're trying to process, or trying to understand a parent's reasoning behind things that as a child sometimes just doesn't make sense. At least that's for me.
Yeah, and to be told that like, oh, this is a special thing, and to keep it secret, it does make you feel scared, but it can make you feel like, wow, I'm somewhat special, to my dad. My dad's pointing out that I have a specialness to me.
Yeah. And as I said, there isn't a lot that we can get as much in terms of the Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub, but if you really start kind of like zooming out a little bit and looking into the parent-child, siblings and parents' relationship, you see that actually there's something between the brothers and Yusuf. Like Yaqub alayhi salam said that because something has happened. So their interaction with each other, there's something going on with each other, which is something that's very common. We know that siblings, the oldest versus the middle child, there's the middle child syndrome, right? The youngest, very irresponsible. The old, and they get away with anything versus the oldest being, I'm just like always accountable. They were more strict with me. I know those of us who are oldest understand that. So there is that aspect, right? There is something in terms of the kids' dynamic based on what the parents do. And there's the aspect of the parents do have actually, a lot of the times, do have certain biases and do have certain views. about things based on what happened, based on certain things that have happened. I had to deal with this with my kids, and I was always, you would like to consider yourself as being the perfect mom and the perfect parent, and it's all their problem. They are the teenagers, they are the wrong ones, they are the naughty ones, they are the ones who don't listen. You could just like put all your views onto them, and you think it's just they're not the ones who are doing what they should be doing, and I am just great. But if you really are honest to yourself and you start getting fed up with the constant arguments with them, it might be a good idea to just stop and say, well, maybe I need to look at myself, and maybe I need to see, is there something? I'm not perfect. I am not, even if I'm a parent, I could be actually wrong in how I'm seeing certain things. And that's what I saw. I saw that actually with all my children. It wasn't just a full revelation altogether, but one by one at each time, it was hard. It was hard for me to actually look and see, oh my God, yeah. With one of my children, mashallah, she has a strong personality. And a lot of times when I used to feel when she was my first girl teenager, right? They have demanding, doing all of this. So all what I felt from her is like, you don't care about me. All what you care about is getting your things done. And that's all what you want. And when I really wasn't honest with myself, it was a hard moment for me to actually see that. But all what she's doing is she's asking her mom, like, who would she go to if she doesn't ask me? And all what I was doing, I was just like dumping my failure onto her. Oh, you don't care about me because I wasn't doing what I should be doing for myself, and I was blaming her for that. So shifting that for me, I realized that I was not fair with having a certain view for her. Same thing with my other daughter. All what she wanted is like, I needed you to care for me and to pay attention to me. And I was always coming to her just like, I need to solve your problems. I don't need you to solve my problems. Just listen to me. Just hug me. That's all what she needed. And I couldn't understand that. And she would tell me over and over, Mama, you're not listening. You're not listening. And I would just say, no, you're just saying whatever. So it took me some time to do that. And it really made a huge difference. And again, as hard as it is for a parent, because you would want to be perfect, but you might actually have a view of your children. And I know for sure, Archie, since you've been working with teens for a long time, you have a lot of these examples where people don't like to admit that.
Nobody likes to admit that they're doing something wrong, especially parents. Parents, they feel this pressure that they have to do everything right and they shouldn't be questioned. And they get into the mode because, you go through a phase with your children where at age 3 or 4, all they do is ask redundant questions. And so you kind of get into a mode of like, I already answered this question, stop asking questions. And if you don't get out of that mode as the child ages, there's a pitfall in that you don't get to see and understand that their minds are changing and their way of thinking is changing. And you kind of abbreviate their growth in your own mind, and your perspective on them is limited while they continue to make progress. So I think that's a danger for some parents who aren't open to like hearing in a non-judgmental way what their children are trying to tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I can just say it's been interesting with the dynamics within my own kids, because I have to, you also have to give space for the kids to grow and kind of also see that what they're imposing on maybe even younger siblings. Like, for instance, I have a situation, or had a situation with one of my children where, like they would just double down on the youngest and, be overbearing and just being like, they're being the mom or the parent to the younger siblings. And, I had to step in and take like teach them, really be like, well, why are you doing this to your younger sibling when you were that age? Nobody did that to you. You had the freedom and the breath to be a child and to grow into what you wanted to do and explore. So, why are you taking on that responsibility of being the parent to the younger sibling and doubling down and being like, you can't do this and you can't do that and listen to me, and kind of like being the bossy
Yeah.
the bossy child. So there's a lot of dynamics that come into play, and when you as a parent, but then also as a child, like looking at things from their perspective and trying to understand, why do they do the things that they do, and is it coming, where's that coming from? Where
Yeah.
is that stemming from? Is it stemming from some need of them, of theirs internally, or is it stemming from, is it something that I did? Is, to be able to question myself as a parent of, have I taught this behavior, or is there something, is there a need that they're trying to showcase, and I need to learn or read between the lines of what is their need that I can fill in for.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and I think what's so beautiful about your example is that you basically hit on the second point that Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam mentioned, which is when he said that this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually completing his blessing unto you and to the family of Yaqub. So he basically had a bigger picture, right? He was looking at like whatever was happening with Yusuf is not for Yusuf only. It's actually for the whole family. We are now honored as being responsible as a whole family to continue this legacy of prophecy and to continue the legacy of being responsible to carry the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life. So he was seeing the blessing for himself and for the rest of the children. The rest of the children were not seeing it. And a lot of the times, kind of like what you're alluding to in your story is the opposite perspective, where the children couldn't be actually seeing that the bias that their parents might have is out of their own limitation. They're not seeing the bigger picture. They're not seeing everything. Sometimes whatever the parent is doing, and when he's protecting Yusuf alayhi salam, for instance, it was for a reason, because he's seeing something that the rest of the brothers are not seeing. Just like how we were saying, well, I mean, to your daughter, when you were her age, you took your time and you did whatever you wanted, and I treated you as a little child in a certain way because you need to have that attention as a little child. As they say in our tradition, when the little one is small, is young, you need to give him more attention. Or when the one who's sick from your children, you need to give him more attention. So there are certain reasons, and a lot of the times, the conversation you had with your child opened their eyes to it. Oh yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not fair to my mom or to my child with that. I don't know, Archie, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that really points out how kids only have a piece of the bigger picture, right? And each kid, from their own perspective, has their own perspective on what the truth is, but it's not the absolute truth. The only one who might have the understanding of the whole big picture is the parent. And so it's really important that if the parent can explain that in a way that the child can understand, that the child then gets an understanding and gets some insight into what is going on with the behavior that they don't agree with or that they have a bias against. So it falls on the parent to make that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why conversation is key, right?
Yeah.
So with what we have so far, and inshallah there is a continuation to the story. This is kind of like, now we're focusing on the parent responsibility now of you as a parent having a view of your children or a bias of your children. And by the way, we all have views and we operate through those views with each child. Now, it could be coming from something that happened. Yeah, that's true. But the problem is this view becomes basically the way you see them all the time. Like, oh, they don't listen. Oh, they just don't, they are careless. Or they're just like, they only want what they want. They don't pay attention. You start painting, all their behavior is seen through that, and it's not fair to do that. So when you pick up what your view about your child is, and then you start paying attention to it, then you might notice how, oh, well, I'm just looking at my child through this view, and maybe they're not always doing that. Yeah, there are times, and of course, as a parent, you have to be careful and you have to correct those kinds of things, but you also want to give them the space and to understand that they're way more than just like this certain behavior or this certain view that your mind basically made of them. And it's very frustrating as a child to live through this lens all the time and to feel that my parents think I'm whiny. That's all what they think. And if I open my mouth, they're just going to think that I'm whiny. So it's
Yeah, and
important to have, yeah, go ahead, please.
I think it's important that like every kid wants to emphasize, especially teenagers, that's not fair, that's not fair. They really measure things according to, am I getting the exact same thing as my sibling? When that's the concept of fairness, but then the concept of equity is, the parents thinking, well, I need to give my child what that child needs at this moment to have the same opportunity as before. And some kids have different needs compared to other kids. And only the parent can explain that to the child because they're just looking at things in concrete terms and what they
Yeah,
observe.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so 2 points here, right? The first point is talk, communicate, explain. And the second point is listen. Just listen. A lot of the times this is what I used to do. Just like whenever I'm listening, I'm just listening to tell them, no, that's not right. No, just listen to what they're saying fully and get their emotions behind it, get their feelings behind it, get their world, like put yourself in their shoes, just so that you understand fully what's going on, and then tell them what it is for you. So that kind of communication is extremely essential with children in the family dynamic, so that they don't have to carry these things with them, and it doesn't impact their own relationships with each other. When they're seeing that you're always let certain children get away with certain things, and other children they're always kind of like you're harsh on them, it will carry with them, and you're responsible to actually make sure that you clarify these points to them.
Yeah, a
So
personal
Yeah, and I
share on
think
that is. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead, Archie. I want
No,
to hear your
for me,
story.
I'll go ahead. Yeah, my personal share on that is, yeah, the bias between me, like I was favored, and my brother he was the baby until I was born, and because this issue wasn't addressed, it really created a divide between me and my brother, and we never grew up close because of that divide. When looking back on it, had one of my parents really, clarified these things to my brother and myself, maybe we would have had a different dynamic, and it would have had a much different life together than the one that we did have.
Yeah. I mean, and what I was just going to add to and say was, I think the third element is self-reflection, is really looking at yourself and being honest with, like, for me, looking at myself and being honest with myself and seeing, do I have any favoritism? Do I show that? Maybe I not realize it. Like, do I have some level of favoritism? Where do we have a level of favoritism within our family? And then reflecting again on our own upbringing, like Archie was saying, is just looking back on our own childhood and trying to connect the dots and see, what did I make assumptions about to my parents? Like, might have made assumptions about my parents. I made a lot of assumptions about my siblings, you know, in these conversations, right? In internal conversations, that there's an element of self-reflection that needs to happen as we even like delve into some of this work of analyzing what's going on between Yusuf and Yaqub and his brothers, as well as how do these dynamics actually play out in our own lives for real.
yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, that's so true, and especially when we're all children, right? And it's funny because I have two younger brothers, I always felt that, okay, well, my parents were harsh on me. They kind of like I had to go by the book basically since I'm the oldest, and then my youngest got away with whatever. He did whatever he wanted. And it's so funny. The other day we were sitting, my brother and my parents were there, and my dad said, "Yeah, well, I mean, we only did it to Nadia." And so my brother said, "Yeah, of course, she's your favorite." Like, what do you mean I'm his favorite? I thought you were his favorite. So it's interesting how we have these kinds of things, but we just never talked, right? I mean, alhamdulillah,
Yeah,
we
we
were
never
able to
share
get
these
past a lot of things.
conversations. Yeah, and it's funny because even as, like you're saying, even as adults, and you're learning things even from your own family dynamics, even to this day. Like recently, I was having a conversation with my mom, and I picked up on a comment that she made that, as we're studying this, Surah Yusuf, it was really like highlighted for me. But she made a comment like, oh yeah, your dad, his favorite is Hussein, like my brother Hussam. And she just kind of just threw that out there and said that. And I was like, wait a second, that's his favorite? Like, I didn't know that was the favorite of the family. And then it made me think of made me go back in time. I'm like, wait, where did I see that in growing up? Because I didn't realize he was the favorite. I thought someone else was the favorite. So it's interesting how we even to this day, my parents are making these comments and I'm still a child. So I'm still trying to understand their comments and looking back on my own life and being like, oh, I guess there's a favorite here that I didn't know about.
And let me give you the perspective of the favorite, because I was the identified favorite as the youngest. And I wished as a child, now as an adult, I know what to say, but as a child, I didn't know what to say. I wished I could have said to my siblings, it wasn't my choice. This isn't something I chose. So to be punished for it and to be told that, oh, you have it easy and all this stuff, it's like, I felt so angry about that growing up. And even though I did enjoy the privilege of being the favorite, it wasn't something that was always a good thing.
All right.
So, I think one of the biggest takeaways for, this session, as well as moving into, the next session, is kind of like almost having an introspective look, and seeing where you fall and where you lie in these scenarios, right? Nadia, what would you say is the takeaway and kind of like the introspective,
absolutely. And
thought-provoking
I think
assignment to give to our listeners to kind of delve into the story and really see how
exactly.
all of these characters really apply to you.
Yeah, and exactly, and this is where I want to say a point before we mention what exactly we would like people to, if you're the listeners or if you're really interested to work on. You could just listen to this and walk away, and it's fine. It'll be fun for you or interesting, whatever you want to get out of it. But to really benefit from this, and I know it's not comfortable. I know we don't like to do this, but actually start drawing a parallel for yourself. As a parent, if you are a parent, you want to do that work. As a child, if I'm a child, of course, we're all children. You want to draw that parallel to yourself, and you want to see what is it that you would like to say. So I know, Shaza, you're going to share with us this piece that we would like people to work on, the listeners to work on, if you would like to this week or throughout until the next episode, to just draw that parallel for yourself.
Yeah. So listen closely. We're going to share with you a couple scenarios and questions, and just think about these throughout the week until the next episode and really distinguish which of these apply to you. So, one, if you are a parent, even if your children are adults, which one of these applies to you? A, you don't think you have a bias. However, you sense that your children feel that you have favoritism. You think, though, it's their problem, that they're favoritism. B, you are aware that you have a bias and you just feel justified. Or C, you became aware of your bias and you want to address it, like for real. Or scenario number 2 is, as a child, which this applies to everyone, distinguish which one of these applies to you. A, your parents are biased and you think they are wrong, and you could even be hurt from this situation. B, your parents are biased and you accept and understand it. Or C, you don't think your parents are biased at all. It takes a moment of being truthful to yourself to see where you are at in these different perspectives as a parent or as a child. So after you do that, after you sit with that and think about that and process that, We want you to move on to like step 2. And we want you to have an honest conversation with your family. Try to listen to what the other person has to say and hold yourself from wanting to respond to them and sort of justify yourself. Just listen and understand how it is for your child or a parent. What is it that they're going through? What are they trying to express to you? Acknowledge where you are having a bias, like acknowledge that for yourself and sit with it. So those are some of the thoughts that we want you to think about in the next week throughout until we go to the next episode and then that next podcast. So, we hope you really look into these questions for yourself.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that in these 2 ayahs, we basically focus on the parent having a view and a bias towards their children, right? And how sometimes they do have there is an exception to that, which is sometimes they see the bigger picture. So that's what we focused on this time. And inshallah, in the future, what we're going to be focusing on is we're going to go the other way around. Or what do you as a child have towards your parents? So that's but let's do the first work, which is basically us as parents. That's the one that we're responsible for. And then we look at the other one, inshallah.
Yeah. So we really hope that you take this time this week, be reflective, be honest with yourself. And we hope that next week you'll join us as we delve into the story of the children, as the plot starts to thicken between the conversations with the brothers and their dad and how they start to plot against Yusuf. So, hit subscribe and join us next week.
If you like listening to our conversation about the Quran, imagine how much more you would get out of participating in a live conversation about the Quran with Dr. Nadia and a room full of people engaging with the Quran. Join us at our next in-person Seeds of Wisdom retreat, online with our weekly Quran and Me sessions, or for the youth at one of our Camp Z retreats.